Welcome to the January edition of the WisPolitics luncheon at the Madison Club. And just want to say Happy New Year. I'll keep saying that until it's no longer fashionable, but Happy New Year, everybody. Then you should all say Happy New Year. All right. Want to tell you about a couple things. Want to give a plug to the Madison Club WisPolitics membership special. You can pick that up at the registration desk. You know, if you're not a member of the Madison Club, we've been doing our events here for many years. It's great staff. They're always very helpful with events. Many of you are members, but some of you aren't, and I'd encourage you to take a look at the membership offer. I also want to say upcoming, we have a luncheon scheduled for February 29th. That's not a joke, it's leap year, I guess. So February 29th, we have the new Senate Minority Leader. Senator Hesselbein will be here to talk about her caucus. And I want to thank our sponsors for this event series, the 2024 event series. Couldn't do it without you. Hush Blackwell Strategies, under a different name. They've been with us since the very beginning. Thank you, Mike. American Family Insurance, Excel Energy, Walmart, ARP Wisconsin, and Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. So thank the sponsors, everybody. Okay, our guest today, I think you know who he is, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. The Senate Majority Leader. Welcome. Good to see you. So let's just start with 2023. Got a lot happened in 2023. I think a lot of things that people didn't expect to happen in a budget year in addition to the budget. So what are the things that you and your caucus are most proud of in 2023?
Yeah, so going into the year, it was sort of an interesting year. When you start the year looking at a budget cycle where you have a projected $7 billion surplus. How do you deal with that? You can't stick it all into the base because then you're going to have structural deficits moving far into the future. You know, the governor has the ability to propose a budget, which is sometimes unreal, and spent all $7 billion of that plus much more by Medicaid expansion and things like that. And so we took a responsible approach to the budget process. Spent a lot of one-time money on paying down debt, transportation costs, which we normally borrow for, which was great to have that this year because interest rates were higher, and put the largest tax cut in state history on his desk. So if the governor wouldn't have vetoed out 95% of the tax cut, that would probably be my highlight right now. But unfortunately, he vetoed out that tax cut, which would have been, you know, real savings for families all around Wisconsin. So that's unfortunate. But there are so many other good things that we got done throughout the process. The shared revenue bill, increasing historic increases for townships across Wisconsin, for villages, for cities, for counties, to make sure that they can face these inflationary pressures that they've been seeing coming down the road. The largest expanse in school choice since its inception in Wisconsin, which was, if you'd have told me going into the session that we would have convinced the governor to sign that, the former DPI secretary, I would have told you were crazy. So to get that done, you know, when the Brewers Stadium, Miller Park, AmFam Field, sorry for our sponsor, American Family, AmFam Field, was stuck into the budget. That sort of caught a lot of us off guard. Oh, we need to try do that to find a bipartisan solution to make sure that we could keep the Brewers here for the next 30 years. You know, an economic driver in southeast Wisconsin for the state of Wisconsin, and you know, the alcohol bill. So we got a lot of really important things done that's going to set up Wisconsin moving forward. But unfortunately, we still have a lot of the taxpayer money sitting in our general fund, earning interest at least, but that we need to continue to reduce taxes in Wisconsin and keep us, you know, competitive with our neighbors.
So have you given up on the tax cut?
No.
Okay, so how do you make it happen? I mean, because there were a couple tries that you and the assembly made last year and didn't happen. So what gives you hope that you could do something in the remaining weeks here?
You know, so there's been a lot of proposals going around. A lot in the assembly, they're trying to focus on just sort of retiree, lowering the retiree income tax rate. But you know, if a retiree chooses whether or not to stay in Wisconsin or move to a different state based on their income taxes, so does the average working person. They have that ability to move to a different state too. So it's starting to choose winners and losers on who you cut taxes, whether it's through you know, child care tax credits, things like that, or the marriage penalty, or you know, anything else where you're just targeting one group and choosing winners and losers over trying to provide, you know, full tax relief to the state of Wisconsin to keep improving our state. So I've been working with Senator Markline. This might be sort of the breaking news section. We'll get it out of there early. So the main criticism of the third tax bracket, tax cut, going in and out. The main criticism is that it goes too high. That if you're making $400,000 as a family, I forget what the individual rate is, $250,000 individually, that you're wealthy. It's not a middle class tax cut. So what we're looking at is raising the second bracket, the limits. Not up to that $400,000, so that 4.4% tax bracket where we're at now. If you take it right now, it ends at $28,000 something for individual filers, $36,000 for a family. Well, that's not a full-time job in Wisconsin. So move that to actually include middle class, the whole middle class at that 4.4%, because the one criticism that we kept hearing from the Democrats and the governor is that that tax bracket goes too high, it brings in the wealthy. So we're working on a plan just to address that, and that's something that we're confident that the governor could sign. You know, he's talked about, you know, a family that makes $150,000 or $200,000 is not the upper class. So if we expand that tax bracket, and by the way, everybody passes through that tax bracket on your way up through the system, that could provide meaningful tax relief, and it's, I'm sure, something that the Democrats can get behind because it addresses all of their concerns, and something that hopefully the governor will consider, unless he just wants to make sure that next session there's a big slush fund for whatever he wants to spend money on, rather than actually providing meaningful tax relief to Wisconsinites.
Okay, so you would take, what, how much of the surplus would go into something like this?
So we're trying to finalize where that number is going to go, but when you do a tax cut like that, it always costs a little bit more the first year because you're updating the tax codes and things like that. But once it's in place, it's looking like it's going to be roughly $1 billion a year, which we have plenty of money to cover that.
Okay, so it would be for, you are not creating a new tax bracket, you'd expand the middle tax bracket, and then it still wouldn't cover the highest tax bracket.
Correct. There'd still be 4 tax brackets. You know, I would love to go down to 3 tax brackets, which is what we did in the budget. I would love to lower the top tax bracket, and maybe we can do that at some point, but we probably are going to need a new governor to do that. But just expanding that second tax bracket, second from the bottom tax bracket, to include the vast majority of Wisconsin families, the hardworking families, the union families in Wisconsin, the families that vote both Democrat and Republican, could be very meaningful.
Okay, well, there might be some politics involved. It's an election year, right?
It is.
Okay, so I mean, but tax cuts are good for any incumbent who's running.
I think so.
Okay, right, all right. So I guess we shouldn't ignore what's going on with the redistricting controversy, right? Okay, you expect there to be new maps for senators, but not all 33. At least you got that, right?
Yes.
Okay, some senators are going to be thrown in together. Some of your incumbents are going to be thrown in together, right?
I don't know.
Oh, okay, but you would expect some incumbents would be pitted against one another.
Yeah, you would think so. You know, we don't know what's going to happen.
Okay. Okay, what's your best case scenario? What's your worst case scenario?
So I think we're past worst case scenario, as you mentioned, that all 33 of us would have to run again, sort of overturning the elections of all odd senators who were elected last year. And we're only a year and a month into our terms and turning around and running again in 3 months. But, you know, I think we're in a good spot where we have a lot of good senators who are up running again in the even districts, but we have no idea where those districts are going to be. And we obviously think so our districts have been found constitutional by both the state Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court. And the only thing that has changed is the political makeup of the state Supreme Court. A candidate who campaigned on rigged maps, who received $10 million to win the seat from the Democrat Party of Wisconsin, and now the liberal majority of the Supreme Court has hired 2 unelected people to essentially draw maps or decide which map to choose. So we feel that the maps that they choose will probably have a better feel tomorrow when everybody submits their maps. So. But we have a strong case to make to both the state Supreme Court, but apparently they're not actually listening to legal precedent and what's constitutional, but also a great case to make to the U.S. Supreme Court that nothing has changed. Even the one issue that they've challenged these on, the contiguous nature of these maps, our initial analysis of it means in our state Senate districts that 88 people are going to switch Senate districts to fix this. So we have to throw out the entire maps for 88 people who are on these municipal islands. I mean, this could be fixed. And this is why they're throwing out our entire maps. Obviously, it's a red herring. And, but we feel we have a strong case to make to the U.S. Supreme Court. And if that's the route we have to go down, that's the route we'll do. But, you know, elections are about candidates. We have Senator Markline, who's in a district that commonly gets won by Democrats at the top of the district. I think he just won that district last session by about 3 touchdowns. I think he won by about 21 points. And, you know, we have Romaine District up in the north that outperformed Ron Johnson, outperformed Tim Michaels. We have candidates all around the state that in the just 8th Senate District special election, Dan Kelly lost that 8th Senate District seat. We won that 8th Senate District seat. So regardless of what happens, we feel confident that especially with the even districts that are up, we have a lot of good incumbents who I think are planning, I'm working through talking to them, but I think are planning on running again. Obviously it's dependent on where their maps end up and if they're gonna have to move and things like that. But we have a lot of good candidates.
Okay, so our elections have become nationalized, in recent years for various reasons. So, you know, there's a presidential election and a Senate election. And so there's been a lot of news on the presidential election front. You got the Iowa caucuses on Monday, and then soon after that, the New Hampshire primary. So, which of those Republican candidates is best for Senate Republicans?
It's always amazing how fast this process starts, right? I mean, we're only a little over a year away from the last election cycle. I think the answer to your question is it depends where you live in Wisconsin, frankly. If you're in Senator Felskowski's district or Senator Quinn's district, I think President Trump helps up there. Obviously, there's a lot of enthusiasm for him and former President Trump, a lot of enthusiasm for him up there in that part of the state. If you're running in the more suburban areas, President Trump might hurt you, and a Nikki Haley at the top of the ticket might be better for you in a situation like that.
Okay, so you don't want to say. So who's your choice?
Who's my choice? So I've endorsed candidates in the past, and it hasn't worked out well for the candidate. I'm not saying I'm the anchor around it, but I endorsed Frank Lassay at one point for Congress. That really didn't work out well. Granted, I just got to meet him, and I was a new official at that point.
Well, we can blame Frank too. It's okay.
I endorsed Leah Bootmeier, endorsed Rebecca Clayfish for governor, endorsed Jennifer Doro for Supreme Court. So I think I'm batting not very well in primaries. I'm frustrated sometimes with Republicans who go down the road of choosing something that has not worked already. Choosing Dan Kelly, who lost statewide massively, and thinking that the results are going to change. You know, Trump won Wisconsin once, and then he lost Wisconsin. Those are the facts. And I think nationally, I think any other of the candidates would probably do better against Biden, frankly. But it looks like Biden's bad enough that Trump might actually beat him nationally. I don't know how that's going to play out in Wisconsin, but you know, I'm not the biggest fan of Governor DeSantis either. But I really like Nikki Haley, but I'm not endorsing. It's up to the voters at this point, and it looks like it's down to 3 people at this point. But we'll see what the voters decide. But I'm confident that the committee to elect a Republican Senate will do their job. We have great ground game. We've picked up seats that Democrats have won, and we'll recruit good candidates and be out there and make sure that we maintain a strong majority in the Senate.
Okay, so in addition to the Trump issue, you have the whole abortion issue that kind of hangs over Republican politics these days. How do you mitigate that one? Because Trump, I don't think I'm alone in this, Trump plus abortion was not helpful. Well, it hurt Republicans statewide, let's face it. Okay, so how do you mitigate that issue, which maybe is even more of a more powerful issue in statewide elections? How do you mitigate that one?
You know, I think the speaker has sort of taken a little different approach than members of our caucus want to go. He keeps wanting to pass bills that will go to the governor's desk. The governor is smart enough to know, like how I said that, smart enough, I had to correct myself there. The governor is smart enough to know that if you take abortion off the issue, off the table, it's not an issue anymore. So if I was the governor, there'd be no way I would sign anything as abortion's the issue and it's driving voters and turnout and stuff like that. So we're really, even if we wanted to add exceptions, if we wanted to pass something that's a 12-week ban to tighten things, because right now in Wisconsin, you can do abortion up to 20 weeks because of the Dane County, the ruling. They're doing abortion in my district. So passing a 12-week ban would limit abortion, but we can't do that because the governor's not going to sign that. So whether that makes a difference in a candidate's race, they can introduce bills, they can sign on to bills, but ultimately the issue's still going to be on the table until either the state Supreme Court decides, which, you know, they're very excited to take on maps and some other issues, but you can see they're, you know, sort of sitting back and letting abortion sit out there because they know right now this situation is a winning issue for Democrats.
Okay, which is to say your candidates will just have to deal with it individually.
Right. I mean, we all have records. When there's bills introduced, they can sign on to them. But I think getting 17 members of our caucus to agree on a position on abortion when they know it's likely going to be vetoed puts sort of them in a tough position.
Okay, so you mentioned Evers and his position on things. I guess I want to get at your relationship or your caucus's relationship with Evers, especially when it comes to these appointments, because he's been complaining about that, especially since he has a vacant, DNR secretary's position, and you folks tossed a bunch of his DNR or Natural Resources Board appointees. So I guess talk about the appointment issue. I think that's you folks are setting a new precedent, really, in terms of dealing with appointments from a governor. I don't think it's ever been this fractious before. So why is that? And maybe explain that. And what is the ultimate aim?
Is it really that different? I mean, we voted down 10 appointments now and confirmed 490 or some number like that. We haven't voted down a secretary since I've been majority leader.
Yeah, I was going to say there was
since
one.
I've been majority
Okay.
leader. In the last 3 years, we haven't voted down a secretary. And frankly, the governor has been more partisan in some of his appointments. When he appoints people who refuse to follow the REINS Act to the DNR board, we need to vote him down. If he appoints an election commissioner who refuses to actually appoint a new election administrator, we need to vote that person down. So we're doing if we need to just send through every appointment of the governor without vetting them, then why do we even have the confirmation process? So I mean, yeah, it's the governor can play poor me. They're voting down some of my appointments. Well, don't appoint purely political appointees to these boards. Appoint someone who's qualified, who's going to follow the law, who's going to do their job.
Okay, what about I think one of the complaints is it's harder to get people to take these jobs or to take the appointments, or to recruit people. Like, when Adam Payne left, I think at the DNR, that wasn't expected by anybody. I think he was actually seemed like he was forging a good relationship with a lot of senators. And then he goes away. Like, how do you recruit people into it's a partisanized environment. I mean, most people, it's hard to recruit people to run for office, let alone, do something like this too.
It is hard to recruit people to run for office. But I know Adam very well. I've known him for a long time. I've talked to him, but I've read all of his statements on why he was leaving. He didn't blame us. He didn't say it was hard to work with us. So I don't know who he was having a hard time working with, but he said it was family issues. But maybe it's not the Republican legislature. He worked well with working on the PFAS bill and some of the other things, so.
Okay, so your and your caucus's stance on appointments isn't going to be changing. You're going to be, do you plan on moving any appointments coming up?
Yeah, we're going to do our due diligence. Go through appointments. We're going to be on the floor next week, Tuesday. There'll be appointments on the board, on the floor. Probably the vast majority of them will confirm, and there may be one or two that we don't confirm.
Okay, so how does this affect your relationship with the governor, your caucus's relationship with the governor? Do you think that it's worsened? Do you think it's about the same? Do you think it's gotten better?
Just the appointment process?
No. How does that though affect? Doesn't that affect your whole relationship with the governor on various issues, or are you able to parse that out?
I mean, he vetoed a $3 billion tax cut. I think that's a lot worse than voting down a couple appointments.
And so, it doesn't sound like there's much of a relationship, I guess. Is there much of a relationship between you, your caucus, and the governor?
We worked well with the governor's office on some important issues, on making sure that we got the shared revenue bill done, school choice expansion. We were checking with them on the brewers bill to make sure they were comfortable with where we're going in negotiations with the brewers and everything. So when there's big issues that we know are going to be controversial, we'll continue to work with the governor.
So I guess let's go on to medical marijuana. So that might help everybody.
Do you have some for me?
Yeah, maybe that'd help the relationship. I don't know. Okay, so the other house introduced a big bill this week on medical marijuana, heavily regulated by the state, having state-run dispensaries. I think, I guess I would classify the response from you as non-committal. And in the past, you have not been enthusiastic about this idea. So are you more enthusiastic, less enthusiastic? Do you think it has a chance? What's your view?
It's not whether I'm enthusiastic or not about a proposal. I sort of view my role unless something's really horrible, as working with my caucus to see where my caucus is at, to see if we can get support for it, if I think it's good for Wisconsin, things like that. So, I mean, obviously there's no Senate lead on the medical marijuana bill. So I'm guessing the Assembly is going to pass the bill, and it's going to go over to our House, and we will refer it to the appropriate committee. But, you know, obviously the challenge of the bill with a lot of the members of our House is the state-run dispensaries. We have a relatively conservative caucus, and, you know, there are a lot of great safeguards in the bill, and medical marijuana may not be my bailiwick or my area of expertise, but there are members of our caucus who have looked into it. And if something like this passes, there needs to be strong controls. It needs to be for, you know, extreme pain, things like that, and prescribed by doctors. So there's a lot of good things in the bill, but, you know, my caucus, and I think even a lot of members of the Assembly caucus, have campaigned on not growing the size of government. So setting up state-run dispensaries, I think is a non-starter with a lot of our caucus members. If we could go back 100 years with what we know now, when, you know, cars started coming around and we decided we needed to start licensing people, would we go back in time and say, let's set up the DMV? They're so efficient. They get things done well, and, you know, that's exactly what state-run dispensaries are. It's a DMV for medical marijuana. I mean, why would we let government grow the size of government and run that all through government?
Okay, so at least some of your caucus thinks that way. So it doesn't seem like that bill, as proposed, is really going to sail through the Senate, or even sail. Do you see some sort of compromise happening that would allow a medical marijuana bill to get to the governor's desk?
Yeah, I think there could be a way to do it, but yeah, not the current bill.
Okay, so your caucus isn't dead set against the issue. It's set against, your caucus doesn't like the prescribed method, so to speak, right?
Yep.
So,
I mean, I'm not speaking for the entire caucus. There might be members who like it,
right.
But I mean, like I said in my original statement, we treat all bills seriously. We send it through the process, but, you know, sort of the framework of it with growing the size of government, adding a new department in DHS and things like that, just, it seems like overkill.
Okay, so we talked about some of the issues. What are some of the issues that you'd like to advance here in 2024 in the remaining weeks? You know, there's a lot of energy bills out there. I think we could talk about some of the energy bills, especially the right of first refusal. I guess we could talk about that or some other issues. What about the right of first refusal bill? Do you think that that's on path to get to the governor?
I'm hoping so. I've been working closely with Senator Bradley on that bill and sort of the stakeholders in that area. I think we're getting closer to getting the 17 votes in the Senate to get that done. There's the EV charging bill, which, you know, I think is important to get done this session. The whole package of UW bills, which are moving through the system. Like to get a tax cut done yet. I don't know if the governor's going to move on a tax cut, or if he wants a slush fund, as I mentioned at the beginning of this. But you know, there's some really good bills that we can get done yet, hopefully for this session.
Okay, so you mentioned the university. I guess you know, now that's, I'm not going to lay all that's happened with the speaker and DEI, but you know, he's pretty much taking the lead on that. Is that something that you and your caucus supported, his effort to negotiate that deal with the University of Wisconsin system, universities of Wisconsin?
So there was a lot of interest in our caucus to do the engineering billing throughout the budget, because we feel that's important to make sure we have talented people in engineering, keep our people in state. That's a need in Wisconsin. Get the general wage adjustments done for the campuses. But there are also, our caucus also understands that the UW system, has some flaws right now, and they're not always focusing on just, finding people who can find a job in the workforce and focusing on things that really don't advance higher education, whether that's DEI or other woke nonsense that they like to highlight. So even though he took the lead on that, which I think he made some good progress in that area. Our caucus really just wants the UW system to focus on being efficient. Obviously outside of Madison and maybe essentially outside of Madison, the Madison campus, enrollment has been declining. So we need to make sure that we're being responsible with taxpayer money when we invest in the UW system, make sure they're doing their mission of actually, providing future workforce, people who can benefit the workforce, and focusing on what their mission is.
So do you think that the UW system, the universities of Wisconsin, you're saying they're not for producing graduates that to get a job? But these campuses are economic engines, right? In throughout the state, even if they have declining enrollment. You take one away from a community and they feel it, right? So I mean, do you and your caucus sense that, or want to keep that going, or do you want to sort of remake the entire system and into something different than it is?
I think things are different 70 years now from when all the, two-year campuses were started around the state, where, we now have a, interstate road highway system, which we probably didn't when a lot of the, like when UW Sheboygan was started.
Right.
Back in the 50s or 60s, whenever it was started, people can travel. They can drive down to Milwaukee, drive up to Green Bay. So when you have, we've already seen it. Campuses are failing, some of the two-year campuses. So, I think we need to look long-term. I'm not saying we need to blow it up immediately, because it needs to make sense, but we need to look forward on what's the best way of education, what's the best way of using taxpayer money. But when you see 3 two-year campuses shut down already in this session, how many more are going to happen next session? And what's the long-term plan to make sure that we can support we need a strong university system, but is our current system the best way to do it?
Okay, and then how do the tech colleges fit into that? Because, there seems to be some duplication. The biggest, I think, still the biggest feeder into UW-Madison, I think, is Madison College, MATC. So, and like you said, you have these in your district too. So what is the answer to merge these entities somehow, or to remake the entire system? Because I don't think we've had that discussion in Wisconsin really in an organized way. What should higher education look like in 30 years? Have we?
I don't know if I know the answer to that. I'm saying we need to look into that to make sure we're moving in the right direction. Having it just in Sheboygan alone, having LTC is in Manitowoc, but just north of Sheboygan,
right.
Having UW Sheboygan, having UW Manitowoc, does that make sense? Especially when there's some duplication among those three facilities.
Yeah, okay, I'm not campaigning here on this, but it does seem like this could be something that Republicans and Democrats, the governor and the legislature could all say, and Jay Rothman in the system, hey, let's get together and try to make this into something that's gonna work. Obviously the demographics are different. As you say, transportation is different. People's goals are different. So how do you remake the system into a unified higher education system?
Yeah, there's a lot of good. I can't speak for the entire state because I only represent a small portion of it. There's been a lot of good collaboration between the tech colleges and some of the two-year campuses, but you can leave a 2-year campus with very little, or leave a tech college with very little debt, with job skill, to head into the workforce. And we have 2-year colleges all around the state where the declining enrollment. It's beautiful facilities, by the way. We need to figure out how to improve it. I don't have that answer today.
No, I'm not asking. I'm just saying, do you think that that is like a shared goal of everybody? Because obviously the system has had kind of a rough year, right? I mean, and they think they're getting picked on, right? But you're saying, well, it needs to change. And so what is the change that needs to take effect, or how do you even talk about that in a rational way, I guess?
Well, I think Jay Rothman understands it. He's started by trying to reform the system, and I'm willing to work with him, and hopefully I'll be around next session depending on what they number my district here, if I have to run again. But I think everybody's willing to look at that going forward. But I just say that we have the actual answer right now, and I know my tech college president very well, and he's willing to work. He works well with the local campuses, but do we need 3 campuses? Is that the best long term?
I think you're suggesting it's not the best long term, right?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, well, let's have some questions from the audience. You up for that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to talk to the lady you just spoke with in the last few minutes, and I agree with your thoughts that we need a better situation. But it appears as though that anyone that you think of doesn't want good for this one, but that one's bad. This one's good and that one's bad. And I don't think there's enough people who are willing to do what needs to be done, because it's, well, I can't do this, but I want to do this.
Yeah, that's always the challenge. Those members my caucus members who've had campuses closed down in their districts are hearing about it. And they get blamed for it, even though it's not really their fault. We didn't vote on it. So actually, if we provide a plan and game plan going forward, that makes it tough to actually get across the finish line, because if you're closing down a campus in your district, if I close down, I'm not suggesting I want to close down UW Sheboygan, because I mentioned that many times. Don't make this a headline, J.R. Ross.
Okay.
That I want to close down UW Sheboygan. But no, it's.
So really, how are we going to the areas?
But it's the same. It's the same challenge that we face with school district funding, where currently some school districts get 20. Why is my microphone cutting in out? Some districts get 20,000 per student. Some districts are down at the 13,000 per student. And to try fix that issue, it is very tough, because if you're increasing funding and you're not increasing funding in your district, that's sort of a tough thing to do. So, but the reality is, if we don't address it and don't take the tough votes, then every 2 years, also we'll have another campus closed down, another 2 campuses closed down. So if you don't have a long-term game plan and try fix it, it's just reactionary, where I think good legislation is looking forward into the future.
Okay, another question? Go ahead, Sean.
Well, back in the day, they had what they called the Kettle Commission, used to study things like that, so maybe that's something you were talking about, studying the UW system, some outside.
I'm not answering questions here, Sean. I mean, but
Helping your members.
no, I know what you're saying. You're saying, okay, Mr. Majority Leader, is it time to have a statewide commission on the higher ed?
Maybe. I mean, we can keep talking about this. Does anybody have any questions other than shutting down UW campuses? We can keep beating this dead horse.
Okay.
Yeah, we can pivot from that. I'll rescue you, Senator. Bob Spindell, we can talk about that. So I'm just sort of curious, as the Senate Majority Leader, you have one of the appointments for the Elections Commission, and I'm just sort of curious. I've read some of your public comments, but I'm just trying to understand more of your thought process behind continuing to support Mr. Spindell staying on the Election Commission, despite his recent acknowledging being a big elector, and trying to overturn the will of the 2020 votes, just sort of how that reflects on our voter integrity or the perception of it going into 2024. And, you know, are there any potential other GOP replacements that you could consider in place of Mr. Spindell?
You know, I think his job as an election commissioner and what he did as the, whatever district that is, going in as an alternate elector, not necessarily going to call it a fake elector. They admitted no fault in that, by the way, if you read that case. They were sued for $2 million of damages. They made an agreement. And, you know, I would encourage you to read sort of Andrew Hitt's comments about that whole thing. It was another one of the so-called fake electors. They were following a legal strategy which failed, and it came from the Trump administration, or the Trump legal team, and a lot of them were pressured into it, but Mr. Spindell, I think, does a good job on the Election Commission on that part of it, and he will continue to be my appointment.
Do you have faith in the Elections Commission?
You know, I was really a new senator when we passed the Election Commission, and I was actually chair of the Election Committee at that time, and my office did a lot of work on developing that bill back in the day. So, you know, we were coming off a time where the Government Accountability Board was highly partisan and going after Republicans, and we thought the best way to handle this was bipartisan. And we also set up the the Ethics Commission, by the way, in that fashion, and the Ethics Commission has actually worked really well, partly because they have an administrator who is truly nonpartisan, whereas now it seems that the Election Commission has become divided, which is unfortunate and highly politicized. I still think it's the best way to try keep elections out of politics. I don't remember what your original question was, by the way.
No, I said, do you have faith in the Elections Commission? And I think you said, well, the answer is yes at the beginning, but now not so much because of the administrator. So you want to get rid of Megan Wolf?
I think she, I think it's time for her to step aside. You know, we had a vote of no confidence in her as the Senate, and just the controversy around her in 2020 has caused a segment of society to lose faith in elections. And I don't think that's healthy for democracy, for our republic. And, you know, I've said this many other times before, the most important thing about elections is to make sure that we actually have fair elections, that it's easy to vote and hard to cheat. That's the most important thing in elections. But the second most important thing is perception. Because if people don't believe that elections are fair, they lose their faith in elections and they stop showing up to vote. And this is the situation we're in Wisconsin. After Trump won the first time, the Democrats said there was all kinds of foreign collusion and stuff like that, and there was not confidence in the elections. And unfortunately, in Wisconsin, we're a pretty purple state, so it's going to swing back and forth. But, you know, having someone who has lost the confidence of a portion of the Wisconsin electorate is not good for Wisconsin elections.
Okay, so it's a perception problem. It's not, you know, elections are being run okay, and so it's mostly a perception problem.
No, she did make errors back in 2020. She didn't follow the law. I mean, we were in a tough time with a pandemic going on, but at the advice of the Election Commission, she did do things that went above and beyond the law. And we did an audit of it, and she's butted heads with the audit committee. The nonpartisan audit committee has been, you know, confrontational with the elections committees of both houses, and you know, it's not a healthy working relationship.
Do you have somebody in mind who should take that job, or that would be up to the commission? So you were part of the way the commission was formed. You know, it was formed, you know, so that it was basically set up as a neutral. You know, each side had equal votes, so there's a lot of deadlocks. Would you change how you the construction of the Elections Commission, given what you know now?
You know, there needs, sometimes gridlock, if you want to call it that, is a good thing. Getting everybody on board to getting bipartisan support. So this was the whole thing we were struggling with 8 years ago. Who is the person who makes that deciding vote? And so I think no one has proposed to me a better solution. I don't think having the Secretary of State, who actually wasn't elected by the voters, be the determining factor or running elections, making that election highly partisan, I don't think that's the best idea either, because then that election becomes all partisan. I mean, partisan, even though it is a partisan election, but it hyper-partisan makes the election process highly partisan again, which I don't think is healthy.
What about local clerks? I mean, they're under more and more scrutiny, and there's reported threats against some of the. Do you think that they're doing a good job? Do you think they need extra protection or extra support? You know, what's your feeling on? You must hear from some of the clerks in your district.
My local clerks do a great job.
Do you think that they need special protection or support? Are they getting enough support from the state in terms of the job they're doing?
This is the first time I've ever heard that question, so I have no idea where you're coming from.
Okay.
Hi, I've been a clerk for over 20 years. I've been in for over 60 elections. I strongly urge you to get in touch with the Municipal Clerks Association, involve the clerks in the process going forward, because we're the ones out there doing day-to-day everything. And
Yep.
I strongly urge senators and everyone to get a hold of the Clerks Association, because we're the faces and we need support.
Yep.
So that wasn't a planted question from her, but I mean, that is kind of where, I mean,
That
I
actually
hear.
wasn't a question from her.
Okay, but anyway, I mean, there is this, there are reports, nationally and in Wisconsin about clerks under a lot of pressure, and, sometimes, they're not in a position where they're used to that kind of thing, so, but we're in a purple state, as you say, and everybody's under scrutiny. All right, other questions out there? Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
Kind of looking down the road, one of the greatest challenges Wisconsin has is demographic. I know at the local level, we're already struggling to fill police positions, to fill fire positions, to keep EMS services even operating, to fill clerk positions. And it's true throughout industry, it's true throughout Wisconsin. What role does the legislature have to play in Wisconsin's demographic challenge? And that could mean, how do we attract more people, or what are we going to do when everybody in the state looks as old as Jeff and I? Don't answer that one, by the way.
So I think there's a lot of things we can do, and some things we've been doing well, and some things that we can still work on. This has been a topic that you've probably asked questions of legislators on for a decade now, the aging demographics of our state of Wisconsin. And that's tied into, housing challenges. And even if we could get 100,000 people to move into Wisconsin, where the heck would they live? We've done a lot of things with housing to make sure there's, however much we spent in the last budget to try support affordable housing. We've the whole shared revenue bill to make sure that municipalities have more money and an increasing amount of money to hire people to fill those jobs. And we've in the budget we've done some things to try and attract talent into the state of Wisconsin. Having a strong university. I'm pointing to the right team, she just left. Having a strong university system where the top people in their class actually get to go to Wisconsin schools, so that maybe they'll stay here in Wisconsin. There's it's a wide variety, but I think our entire country, it's probably worse in Wisconsin than our entire country, but I can't make young people have more kids to fill that gap. I think the federal government could probably solve some of it by actually securing the border, but then letting legal people come into this country who actually want to work. So there's so many facets to it.
So in terms of the housing, that was a big measure that you folks, the legislature passed, and workforce housing has been an issue of yours. And I'm wondering, what do you think more needs to be done beyond that legislation in terms of, I mean, a lot of this is just out of your hands. I mean, you know, when interest rates are high and you know, supply is low, well, you know, it makes it more difficult. But what do you think more can be done from the state level in terms of housing?
You know, I think we need right now to see how sort of our new 3 or 4 bills that we passed work in theory. There's also some local responsibility. I know in the county I live in, the Sheboygan County Economic Development Corporation, they're building subdivisions with affordable housing. They worked with the business community, got a huge startup fund. I think it was about 10 million from some of the great local companies. They're building a subdivision with, I think it's close to 70, 80 units that they're selling at $250,000. That's workforce housing. People can afford to buy houses like that. They can move into Sheboygan. They can then go work at Sargento or the Kohler Company or Johnsonville. So it's not, I mean, we'll put tools there from the state to try help solve that, but it's also up to the local communities to try solve it in their own local community.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of innovation going on. I mean, Washington County also used some of the ARPA money to set up a revolving fund to help this. Yeah. But it is, the labor shortage isn't going to go away unless we, as you say, somehow solve the immigrant labor issue. And I guess there's only so much you can do on that.
The other answer is reducing the tax burden on Wisconsin income tax earners. When we're the second highest tax state in our region, and there's other states that have no income tax, when you can move to Illinois and pay less in income taxes, or move to Michigan and pay less in income taxes, both run by Democrats, but yet our governor refuses to reduce our income tax rates in Wisconsin, we've become a more mobile world, and we're fighting the perception that winter sucks here, which maybe this week it does. But you know, there's only so many things we can do, but if we have an environment where it makes sense for you to move to a different state because you're gonna pay less in taxes, and if you can make the same amount of money, you're paying, you know, 5%, 7% less in taxes, that's also hurts keeping people in Wisconsin.
So maybe your tax deal is the answer.
I've been making that argument for a year now.
Well, maybe this will be the time. Timing's everything, right? All right, Senate Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu, thank you very much. Thank you to Hush Blackwell Strategies, American Family Insurance, XL Energy, Walmart, ARP Wisconsin, and Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. We'll see you on February 29th. Thanks, everybody.